Hey everyone, welcome back to another Latent Space Lightning Pod. This is Alessio, founder of Kernel Labs, and I'm joined by Swix, founder of Small AI.
Hello, hello. Today we have a fun lightning pod with Brendan Falk. Brendan, I feel like you and I go back a little bit, but now you're, I guess, introducing yourself as the founder of Zeus.
Correct. Yes. We've gone back probably like 4 or 5 years at this point. But yeah, Brendan, founder and CEO of a company called Zeus, and excited to talk about the pivot that we did about a month ago and everything that we learned.
Okay. Actually, you set it up really, really nicely. So I will just queue up the tweet and hopefully figure out the screen share because I just changed browsers again. I'm now back to Arc, the old faithful browser here. Okay. So people can learn about your Fig journey. I was an early Fig user and I now use Warp. Long story short, now you're working on AI stuff. You tweeted about 2 months ago that we were in conversations for doing a pod on AI native Palantir, and then you pivoted away. And so we just wanted to cover this because obviously Palantir is a super hot topic. Everyone wants to deploy forward deployed engineers these days. Everyone wants AI native transformations. What happened?
A lot. And I can really dive into it. I'll rapid fire through my background as to like how we landed on this. And then I can talk through, what the business was, what we learned, why we decided to pivot away. My background, yes, I was founder and CEO of a company called Fig. We got acquired by AWS in 2023, became part of Amazon Q Developer, and I led product at Amazon Q Developer for about a year.
Which, by the way, I've heard very good things from other mostly Amazon people, but actually a very good CLI.
It's very similar-ish to Claude Code, but with some differences, and it seems to be going really well. I've obviously left Amazon now, but yeah, it's going really, really well. I wanted to start another company though, and so what I did was I moved to this crazy team called the Amazon Private Equity Business Development Team. And that's exactly the face, Swix, that pretty much everyone gives me when I say that. And it was very deliberate. My role was the global AI lead. So I was working with all of these private equity-backed customers of AWS on AI transformations effectively. And what's interesting is AWS has about 20,000 customers that are backed by PE firms. And why I deliberately picked this role is I wanted to get as close to as many different types of customers as possible to sort of think through what I wanted to start for my next company. Private equity doesn't discriminate. They've got every industry, every geography, every company size, and they also, compared to most large enterprises, move fairly quickly because at the end of the day, these private equity firms just want to maximize return on their funds, which is usually maximize the enterprise value of sale for these companies. What I ended up doing was working with probably hundreds of executives and like tens of companies on these major sort of AI transformation initiatives. And I saw the full spectrum of companies going from, hey, what is AI? I've heard a lot about it, but I've got no idea how it works, all the way through to like software companies that were just absolutely ripping, that had already integrated AI into their products, were going really well. And so I spent a lot more time on these like really large companies. And what's so fascinating is we're in Silicon Valley and we see all of these software companies just iterating so quickly on AI, and we think that that's what the rest of the world is like. But I would regularly be on calls with companies where they'd have $1 billion of revenue. They'd be in the Midwest somewhere. No one's ever heard of them. And they'd be asking questions like, yeah, so what is Anthropic? Like that's the sort of type of question I'm getting. And so, that's one end of the spectrum. And this was obviously like about a year ago. And so things have definitely changed. But my role was basically to work with them on understanding their business, understanding where AI could actually have an impact, and then helping them get those into production and actually capture the value of it. And so I was doing this for so many companies and across lots of different industries, lots of geographies, and I decided to go and start a business doing this full-time for myself and going after much, much larger companies, going after the global 2,000 companies. And I can keep going here because this is sort of the story, but feel free to jump in if you got questions. If not, I'll keep going.
I think you're on a roll, but Alessio, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I think if I'm in your shoes, I'm like, man, these people don't even know what Anthropic is. Why would I go be the Palantir for enterprises,
I honestly got off the call sometimes with these customers and just went, man, you could give me 2 engineers in like a week or 2 and we could probably save you $1 million. But it was just and it wasn't this company's fault, is they're just not technical companies. I bucketed these companies into tech companies and non-tech companies. And within non-tech, are they technical or non-technical? Do they have good in-house engineering resources? So take like Goldman Sachs, they're actually quite technical. They've got tens of thousands of engineers, whereas a lot of other non-tech companies are really not technical and they're outsourcing to Accenture. And so one of the key things that I saw was these companies knew that AI was adding value. They saw on the news that, hey, Klarna has saved tens of millions of dollars by customer service automations, and Amazon saves this amount, and this company saves hundreds of millions of dollars here. So they saw that AI was creating real value. They were playing around with it themselves, saying it was creating value, and they had no idea how to actually get it done. And so what I ended up seeing is they were all going to Accenture. And what was happening is the board was yelling at the CEO, saying, where's our AI strategy? The CEO was yelling at the SVPs and other C-suites saying, what's our AI strategy? The SVPs were yelling at the VPs saying, what's our AI strategy? And once you get down to that layer, like, the job of these people is not, if you're the head of customer service, you're the head of insurance claims processing, you're the head of something else, your job is not to be the AI wizard. Your job is to do, your function and your business really, really well. And so they were all basically going to Accenture or another system integrator saying, hey, please help us. And these system integrators were just sort of bleeding these companies dry. They were basically saying, hey, we'll come in, let's do 20 POCs. And none of these POCs got into production. There were all these fun sort of science experiments, and they sounded good, but it's pretty easy to get to an 80% good solution with AI. AI does most of the heavy lifting, but nothing was getting into production. And so I just saw that, hey, these large, non-sexy, non-tech companies have tons of money. They want AI too. They're actually willing to spend the money on AI and to do these transformations. They're probably the companies that could be transformed the most and capture the most value from AI, but they have no idea how to do it in-house themselves. They're paying to outsource it. These companies are not incentivized to do a good job. The traditional system integrator model is sell more headcount for longer. It's not create a really high quality solution and get it into production. And then on the flip side, the time it's taking for software to build high quality software, to build AI agents is going down to zero. And so I just saw that there's this amazing moment in time, strong demand, amazing new supply side. We could come in and build a sort of new business here that helps these large enterprises transform their core operations with AI. And so I ended up leaving Amazon, starting this company, Zeus. And the idea, pretty simple. Number one, we would only go after the global 2000. That was very, very deliberate. Two is we were building very custom software. So the idea was we wanted to get to a $5 or $10 million contract with every customer that we worked with. You can really only do that if you go after the global 2000. And then three is we would do the end-to-end solution for these customers. We would do the strategic advisory. Hey, what is AI? How can it impact my business? What should I be prioritizing? Two is the custom software development. How do I actually build this? How do I make sure it passes the evals? How do I even build evals? How do I get it to production? And then three is once it's in production, how do we do the change management? How do we actually capture the value from all of these AI changes? So we would advisory, the build, the change management. And the idea was if you're getting $10 million, if AI can automate so much of this process, hey, it doesn't matter how custom it is, doesn't matter what the use case is, let's just come in and go after it and solve these big problems. And the interesting approach that we took, and this is where the sort of Palantir style comes in, is, well, obviously we're very, very hands-on. We would go, in some cases, like to the customer on site. But two, we'd also have a software platform that we would build our products on. And so the idea was, we're not just going to be a services business. How do we get some sort of high gross margin recurring revenue out of this? Well, we are going to build our, Foundry, similar to Palantir, build all of our solutions on top of that. So our, Foundry, the Zeus platform, was effectively an AI agent builder. You could build, test, observe, and monitor and deploy AI agents. And there was also a document intelligence platform. So we built this out and we worked, I can talk through all the customers, but that was the key pitch. Enterprise AI transformations, only going after Global 2000, aiming for a $5 to $10 million contract, any use case that we would go after. And then, maybe you're thinking, oh man, big scope. And yeah, obviously it was a big scope. But I can talk through what we did. And that was the key pitch that we started with. And obviously we pivoted away from it about 6 months later.
And what was the start not working through the PE firms? Like if I kind of look at the background, it's like, hey, I work with a PE firm. They want to save money. So I should just work with them to get in all the portfolio companies to do this.
So this is one of the reasons we also pivoted away. And the same reason with PE firms is, the model really only works if you end up with a really large contract. Let's play out this scenario. Let's say the contract was a $500K contract. all right, you got to, and you'll, as you hear me talk through why we pivoted, all of this stuff takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to actually understand what product needs to be built and do the statement of work. Number two, it takes time to do the implementation and to do the build out. Three, you have to maintain the products after they're built. Four, things go wrong. You got to factor that in. And then five, there's still headcount involved here. It's not just like AI replaces everything. And so and I said this in my tweet, it's the amount of work for like a $500K contract versus $1 million contract versus a $5 million contract. It's not proportional. It is like, a little bit more work to get a much larger contract. And so it's just far more optimal to go after these much larger customers if you are doing this model where there's not really much repeatability. Like if we were doing exclusively insurance companies, for instance, then it just makes sense to get as many insurance companies as possible. And if you can get in a small company, go for it, a large company, go for it. But we're deliberately saying, no, we're going to build very, very custom software for you, custom AI agents specifically. So it doesn't really make sense unless we can scale up one day to $10 million contracts. And maybe another anecdote is like, if a company is a $100 million revenue company, there's just no way they will ever pay us $10 million annually. It's just, that's 10% of their total revenue. And you're taking a bet that their revenue doesn't go down. Well, what if they're a $1 billion revenue company? Okay, $10 million, 1%. That's probably one of the larger vendors that you have. What if they're a $5 billion company? That's effectively the global 2000. So we had a pretty hard floor on $5 billion revenue plus. Otherwise, we just could never see a path to getting to these really large numbers.
Yeah, and maybe talk about the initial outreach. I'm sure they get a billion emails of, we're going to help you use AI in your company.
So this is the thing, it's if you actually look at the Palantir model, what sort of happens is Alex Karp goes to Davos and he has dinner and lunch with all these CEOs and they go, wow, we like each other, let's pass it down the chain. And then, the SVPs of each org have some negotiation about what's actually going to be built here. They do some pilot in a really short period of time. They show unbelievable progress and then they go out and sign a sort of annual contract and show even more progress. And so I'm obviously not going to Davos, maybe not yet at least, but one of the theories here was, one, I have some connections through Amazon, which was really good, where we know customers. Two is I have connections from my last company and through Fig, I have college connections, but also we picked our investor very deliberately to go after an investor that had these really large global 2000 enterprise connections. And not just like, Salesforce and these large software companies, is we're going after the really unsexy companies that you've probably never heard of, those types of companies. And so, we really picked our investor to make sure that we could get those introductions. That's a short-term thing. In the long term, like obviously we have to build our own go-to-market motion, but we deliberately worked with an investor that had that. So the first 10, 20 introductions literally directly came from our investors, our angel investors, etc. And then some through my personal network as well. Fortunately, solved that problem. But yes, that was a problem that the idea was if we had some really good case studies with these really large customers, be able to get the next five. And the other thing is, we don't need to get to thousands of customers here. If we're going for $10 million contracts, to get to 100 million of revenue, you need 10 customers. And obviously some of them will fail and some of them will, take longer, but we really needed a small number of high quality intros. And so the investor path was the main way to get there initially.
There were a few other points that you brought up in your thread. I'm curious if you want to double click on any other one of them. So we talked a little bit about the deployment and lack of use case consistency. Any other stories or warnings to other founders that you might want to pass on?
I can go through, I'll go through the process that we talk to the customers. And then for each of them, I'll say where it went wrong and plenty of stories. And, I'm never the person who's like, you should not do this. It's I'll just give the anecdotes and then hopefully founders listening can take it with a grain of salt and decide if they want to do it or not. But so what we did is we would go to a customer. These customers would know that AI was a big thing, but they really wouldn't know how to prioritize. So first bit was the strategic advisory. And we do this pretty simple thing, which works really well. And I did this at Amazon, was we would basically put together a list of use cases and then we'd plot them on this graph. And on the y-axis was the business value that would be created if we actually solved this with AI. And then on the x-axis was the technical feasibility. So business value, technical feasibility. And what you end up with is this graph. In that top right quadrant, you can see oh my God, these are slam dunk use cases. You'd often see things like customer service would almost always be at that top right of just, look, this is very automatable. The business value is pretty clear. This is usually a use case to go after. And so we would do that for the company and it's pretty quick to do that. That was pretty easy. The second thing is we would then pick a use case to go after. And so this is something that I actually got wrong. And this is, if I were doing it again, I do something differently. Is our thesis was, all right, we're new to this industry. How the hell is someone going to trust us with a $10 million contract? Maybe we'll go after the quick win use cases. So like high technical feasibility, but lower business value. So it's more like the bottom right quadrant. Let's get our foot in the door. Let's get maybe $1 million contract out of that, or a 500K or something like that. And then we'll quickly expand across the other use cases. And you know what? Because we've done all this system integration for this use case, it's going to make it easier and faster to do these other use cases as well. And what ended up happening is they were okay with that and we'd go after that, but it still ended up taking as much time. So this sort of goes into the build out where firstly, we'd have to understand the use case, just writing up the statement of work, going through the sort of sales process, working with the customers on what the product needs to be built. It's really hard to do that for one thing, but when you're doing like 10 different use cases, honestly, it's an absolute nightmare. And so this is another thing that I wouldn't say got wrong, but you really have to go after large contracts if you're doing very, very custom use cases. If you're doing small contracts, you just want repeatability. So to give examples of types of use cases we're working on, these are all Global 2000 companies. We had an insurance carrier. We were working on RFPs. This is like a Fortune 500 company. RFP, so like a community college wants to get a proposal for insurance for all of their professors, and they fire it off to the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier quickly comes up with a quote and responds back. That's one. We're doing first notice of loss for another insurance carrier. We were doing like a legal use case for a large conglomerate that does a lot of M&A, and they wanted to do contract review, like vendor contract review. We worked with that customer. We ended up doing a customer service use case for them as well. We're working with like a large government on like a unemployment related sort of workflows that are needed to help people get jobs and match them to jobs. We're working with an energy company. We're working with a call center use case for a large sort of B2B, a consumer SaaS company that had a large call center for like a core operation for their business. So like Swix, you're smiling. Yeah, we basically ended up building Vappy, we built a Decagon, we built like all the big names. Is we were building so much stuff just to solve each of these issues. And the problem is, and so this gets to the build component is, I'm not an expert on first notice of loss. I'm not an expert on, RFPs, etc. So we're trying to get up to speed on these things as quickly as humanly possible. And there are just so many edge cases. This RFP example is a good example. If I asked ChatGPT, what's the most messed up thing that could possibly happen with RFPs, it would give me a bunch of things. And I'd go, there's just no way some of these things would happen. And one thing that happened was an email would come through for the RFP and it would say, here's the questions. It's in a Word document. And you'd click on the Word document and there was an Excel spreadsheet embedded in the Word document. Like this was a technical thing that I didn't even know existed. Like it was just so...
Embed that?
Yeah, like embedded. And like, I would have looked, if ChatGPT told me that was a thing, I would have just laughed and just been like, that's crazy. Sure enough, if that happens 1% of the time, but you're a Fortune 500 insurance company and you process tens of thousands of these a year, that's like a lot of times. And so there are thousands of little paper cuts and edge cases here. And so when my thinking coming in is, AI is just going to automate everything and, software is going to be easy and commoditized. But in reality, you're working through all of these really crazy edge cases that you couldn't possibly imagine that are not just industry specific, they're company specific a lot of the times as well. So a lot of the time was spent on the messy data problem. We'd look at databases. The databases would be missing information, there'd be conflicting information, there would be wrong information, there'd be edge cases that we couldn't account for. And so this comes back to sort of my thesis around we could automate a lot of the process. So much of our time is just actually human to human interaction of saying, hey, what the hell is this? How do I fix this? How do I make sense of this? And then once we finally got the evals working, easy. The AI is really, really easy. But getting the evals, like writing those evals, getting that right, just took so much time. And then this comes back to, well, it takes so much time for a 500K use case, same amount of time for $1 million use case, basically. It's just, there's so much work that goes into just getting that right. The understanding what needs to be done, understanding the product, building out the sort of the solution and looking at the messy data and cleaning that up. Another interesting anecdote here was on integrations. Everyone on Twitter has been saying for the last year, 6 months, MCP is going to solve integrations. And in reality, I do think AI is going to really make integrations a lot easier. But in reality, if your docs for the internal system are incorrect, the AI has to wrestle with it in the same way a human wrestles with bad docs to work out what the hell is going on. If there are rate limits that aren't published, you need to work out how to fix that. If there are error messages that are cryptic, you need to work out how to fix that. And so a lot of our time was actually just spent on doing these integrations. And it makes sense why companies like Fivetran and Airbyte have hundreds of engineers just dedicated to maintaining these integrations, because it's a lot of work and it's not as easy as just like, oh, I'll just ask AI to write the node integration script or something like that. So I could see a path to AI solving the integrations problem. I really couldn't see a path to AI solving this sort of messy data problem, because it's more of a people process problem than it is like an AI software problem. One other anecdote is, okay, we build it, we deploy it, it's in production. The one thing I really underestimated was the ongoing maintenance cost. Same thing, there are these edge cases. And even if you think you've solved all of them, there are always edge cases. And when you're a traditional software company and you sell your product to 10,000 people, you have a customer support team that serves 10,000 companies, and you have, every time you solve a bug for one customer, that helps all of the other customers as well. In this case, the ongoing maintenance cost was way more than I expected. You can't really amortize that across everyone else. And so you would just sort of have to like constantly have someone supporting the use case. So Alessio, when you said like, oh, could you just do this for private equity firms and smaller contracts? One of the big things that really happened here is the economics just didn't really work out as well as I had actually planned out. And I didn't see a path to them getting a lot better. I mean, you could obviously do it, but it only would really work if you either focus on one use case and then go and sell that use case out to 1,000 people, which is traditional, vertical SaaS or just traditional software. Or if you go really, really big, you go after those, like exclusively go after one project that can scale up to $5 or $10 million, as opposed to one company that can scale up. I keep saying last thing, but this is also one other last thing is it sort of felt like there was this existential threat to everything we built for customers, meaning, I just said, oh, we built Vappy and we built Decagon and we built all these things in our internal software. Decagon and Sierra have hundreds of millions of dollars and they have a ton of expertise in this one specific use case. And so at times I felt, we only did one customer service use case, but at times I felt we are working so hard to clean up the data and to actually build out this customer service use case. But I can just guarantee that Decagon is always going to be better. Sierra is always going to be better because they spend all day, every day thinking about it. And so I worried that we'd be the guys that cleaned up all the data. And then at the end, Sierra and Decagon would come in and eat our lunch. And we saw that we did some expert network calls, and we saw that even in customer service, within a year, companies are changing their providers. And so this sort of Palantir model really only works if you do a lot of you have very low or even negative gross margins in the first year. But then once it's deployed into production, you take the headcount off, the margins go up, and you have this nice high gross margin recurring revenue stream ongoing. But if the customer's going to churn, suddenly all of that, it just falls apart. And so you either need to have really heavy ongoing maintenance for that specific customer, which also just lowers your gross margins, or all of these things, which it takes time to implement, way longer than I expected. It takes time to understand what product to build. There's a lot of ongoing maintenance. There's this risk of churn, etc. That's why, those are sort of the main reasons why we just you know what? It actually makes sense to just focus on one specific use case and go after that rather than trying to do 50 use cases for 50 large enterprise companies.
That's a really good overview. Go ahead, Alessio.
So what's the learning, I guess? What are you doing now to take all of this, into experience and then doing something new?
So we decided to pivot, and then the three options we basically had were, one is you could keep doing the model, but only go after projects that go up to $10 million. I think that's really the only way this actually works, or $5 million. Not even at the company level. It has to be the one project that can scale up to be a large company. Two is you pick a specific use case and you just absolutely go after it for a one company, or for one industry usually. That's basically the sort of the two models here. And I think the middle ground doesn't really work as well. We decided to go back to honestly where we have found a market fit. My co-founder and I were at Fig, and we built a developer tools company from zero to hundreds of thousands of active users. This was all before AI, obviously. And so now we're back in the AI game. A lot of the tooling that we built out for our customers was pretty similar to these AI app generation platforms. I really hate the term vibe coding, but that's what we built out. It was just a sort of, let's get back into the game. Let's go out and we call this new brand Hercules. So you can go to hercules.app, and it's so similar to what we built at Fig and so similar to where our expertise are. And so we're about 4.5 weeks in now, and it's really, really freaking good. The AI does a lot of the heavy lifting, but just with our background everything that we've done before, you can actually just build fully production apps. We've done all the back end, we've done all the front end, we do all the database. We don't do any of these sort of integrations with, you have to sign up to Superbase, etc. We just white label all of that stuff. And so we're pushing pretty aggressively on that, but I can see a world where we focus in even more. We just wanted to get back to building and get away from enterprise for a little bit. So Hercules is our priority right now.
I'm curious if you had learnings from Fig in this. So Fig, for people that didn't know, you basically had kind of like a command line marketplace. It's maybe like an easy way to grasp it. It's like you had these different skills. You could like do things more repeatedly. How do you see the rise of Cloud Code and some of these kind of like CLI-based tools? And a lot of them are based on, they have this kind of like concept of hooks. They have like MCPs for integration. Instead, you're going the web way. Is it just because you're targeting a customer that is like less technical? Like, do you feel like the CLI base is like too
really
competitive?
Not satisfying for you, and it's not satisfying for me. When we got acquired by AWS, we actually had a non-compete for our product for 2 years. And so I've got 12 days until that non-compete expires. So I can honestly imagine we will get back into that pretty aggressively.
By the time this comes out, I think the 12 days might have elapsed. So
yes,
please go on Twitter and see what Brendan cooked.
I mean, okay, let's go into that, right? Like, there's so many app builders, there's so many CLIs. It sounds like you're gonna go back in the CLI game. How do you differentiate? What do you think about the cursor problem or the Cloud Code problem as has been going around recently?
Meaning the gross margin problem?
The gross margin problem.
Yeah, so, honestly, I'm not saying we're going to do some AI app like Cursor, etc., but it is a world that we know very, very well. And obviously, we use these tools every day. So I'll start with the like AI app builder, more like the Lovables, the Bolts, the Replets. I think I like to think about which massive company are these newer companies coming after. And so one world, you have Figma. And so a lot of these tools are being used for prototyping and design. And candidly, I think that ChatGPT is going to come in and replace a lot of that, because that's what they did in their GPT-5 demo. They were really showing that off. These things are not designed for production. It's just another reason to come to ChatGPT. So I don't think it's going to maybe win the market. I don't quite know, but I think ChatGPT is going to pretty aggressively get into that. The next sort of type of company you have is the Wix, the Squarespace, the Weebly, and this is more what sort of Base 44 is going after. These are big businesses. Wix has $1 billion of revenue. Squarespace has $1 billion of revenue. They're valued at like $5 to $10 billion each. And the way I think about it is, I think that market is going to expand. Wix is very clunky. It's drag and drop, and it was built in the early 2000s. My brother, probably, who works in finance, is probably not going to use Wix, but he would use some sort of AI native Wix where you could chat and build things, just because the barrier to entry has gone down massively. And so now he's willing to pay $20 a month where he probably wasn't willing to pay for it before. And the good thing about those apps is they go to production. You're not just building a website for fun. You are an SMB building a website. You are a personal, you have a personal website for your portfolio. There's a lot of e-commerce stuff on there as well. The third world is Shopify. That's a $60 billion business. E-commerce isn't going to disappear. So I think Shopify is another area where these app builders can go into. Another is just SaaS. This is a new category that hasn't existed. Is you can build Wix is like static websites and sort of basic, pretty simple stuff. Now you can build full SaaS. I think that market will be pretty big. I mean, the overall global SaaS market is in the hundreds of billions. My hunch is it will continue to grow as opposed to just shrink massively, just because now you can build so many of these micro SaaS apps. Honestly, we're still working out exactly where we want to go. What we've built out over the last month is all of the infrastructure that will allow us to enter each of these things. And our approach is very much, let's make sure that we white label all of these things. So even instead of going to Stripe and getting an API key, that should all just be within us. If you say, I want payments, it should just magically give you payments. If you say, I want to send you an email, you don't have to go to SendGrid. It is all just sort of in our application. And yeah, it's really, really powerful. You can go to it right now and say, build a Twitter clone, and it just one-shots it. All of that just like completely works. It's really, really cool. We're using convex.dev under the hood, and I'll give them a big shout out. Really amazing, real time. They allow us to white label it. It's really good for writing code. Founder's Australian, so that always helps as well. So we've worked closely with them, and they've really helped us make a really great app.
Yeah, we've had your CTO on as well. Yeah, Convex is getting some traction. Actually, it was I just fired up a little app while this was going on, and it one-shotted the game for me, personalized game. And he created that. I didn't do any backend functionality because I didn't know that was supposed to be one of the things. But it looks good. It's got the standard.
That's got the terrible pink and purple linear grading. That's bad. We'll fix that.
You can have any app you want as long as it's purple, right?
We actually have a thing in our system prompt, which is do not do linear gradients unless someone explicitly asks for it. So we try and avoid the. Yeah, we have some. By the time this podcast will release, we literally did a lot of this integration over the weekend. So hopefully by the time this is released, Hercules.app, it's really insanely, it's like very powerful. Lots of stuff.
Amazing. Yeah, I think there is a race going on for what is the ultimate vibe code backend. I think Karpathy talked about it when he was talking about his MenuGen app. For people who don't know, they can look that up. Vibe coding MenuGen is the name of the blog post. Yeah, I think there's going to be interest in that. You're going to build it. Both Lovable going to build it. Superbase should build it. And we'll see who wins. Guess I don't know.
I think this market is going to be enormous, and I think we're just getting started. These models are going to get so much better. This comes to your question though around gross margins, Swix.
Yes.
There's been so much back and forth. Again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. My hunch is a lot of these apps, everyone's saying, oh, they're going to zero, but I still pay for plenty of stuff, which I could build myself. There's probably some free open source clone that I could just download and host myself. And it sort of reminds me of the classic Dropbox hack and use comment, which is just like, oh, why don't you just use rsync and just like people are fundamentally sort of lazy and they're happy to pay $5 just to sort of take something off their plate. And so when it comes to like Cursor and those apps they're obviously at negative gross margins or whatever they're at now, but I think they have the brand, and I think that actually matters a lot. And as crazy as this sounds, I think brand is going to matter a lot in the future for a lot of these apps. If the difference between $1,000 a month and $1,050 a month is not that much for most people who are spending $1,000, and so if that's what enables them to get higher gross margins, it's the brand is the thing I think that will enable them to get higher gross margins. I don't know if they'll get to 80% though. I think that'll more likely be sort of infrastructure to be 10% or 15% plus the cost of the API. And then maybe the large language model providers, they are able to undercut it. But I do just think they have the brand and they have the interface. Where I think it's different with these app builders is you're paying $20 for a website. We do have the toggle, which allows you to select which model you want to use, but we'll probably get rid of that. And so at some point, you just want a website that you want to get deployed. That's it. We're not going after the engineering market here. We're going after the like everyone else in the world who potentially needs a website market. They don't care about Sonnet. They don't even know it exists a lot of the time. They just are like AI. And so I think that is what enables us to ultimately see a path to actually pretty high gross margins. Whereas the CLI based and the sort of engineering focused ones, I think you're in a tougher position because everyone always wants the best model.
I think you will be competed with from the other side by whoever has the best models too. Like people notice when you dumb down models. Like even during the day when people accuse Anthropic of like serving quantized versions of Sonnet, and like they can feel it. I don't know if they can.
They can feel it, but yes, you're talking about engineers. I assume if we look at your list of followers, I'm sure it's very engineering heavy.
Yeah.
There are 8 billion people in the world. I think if, my brother was like, this is a quantized model, he's going to be like, I don't think it either works or it doesn't. And so anyway, we'll see. I think the space is going to be massive. I think the gross margins for the like app builder type, the Wix Squarespace world, the SaaS world will work itself out. I think on the like on hands-on keyboard coders, it's going to be an interesting spot. I think they'll probably be fine, but who knows? We'll all see.
We'll see. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing your journey. I always think like it's rare to get a very honest review of like a pivot and like a thesis that like everyone's kind of interested in, but no one actually spent the time to explore. So thank you for being so transparent.
I'm happy to. I wish all of Twitter was transparent as well, because I feel like a lot of Twitter is hype and videos and ARR numbers and whatever, and it just under the hood, I've done startups for a while now. Everyone knows you're sort of faking it until you're making it. And so hopefully this story helps more people come out and be more transparent about this stuff. And I learn a lot. And as you'll see at the bottom of the tweet, it's like learning, failing fast. It gives me an information advantage. And so like a lot of good things happen out of this tweet for us as well. So I actually think it's the optimal strategy long term, just to be honest and upfront and share all these learnings.
Yeah, I'm curious, as a parting thought, like anyone you want to thank that replied to your tweet and like, got you thinking or helped you out a lot.
There are a lot of founders who replied and said, hey, like they thanked me and basically said, oh, we've been struggling or we've been thinking about this. And they were very, very thankful. And then on the flip side, people like, Bob McGrew, who is the chief research officer at Palantir, OpenAI, and he was formerly at Palantir. We had some back and forth on Twitter. Yeah, like a lot of really interesting people reply. It got a ton of traction. I was like not expecting it anywhere near this much. So it's, I think there wasn't anything crazy that I learned from the tweet. It was more me sharing the learnings and people being just very happy that I had like shared these. Hopefully, if someone wants to still do the business, I still think there's a great business to be built here. And if someone doesn't want to do it because of me, that's also great. It's anecdotes and people can just choose to use it however they like.
Awesome. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Cool. Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
Brandon.